Yep. All right. Welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samu?
Well, we're going to be consistent with some of our very early episodes uh, in some things that I came across in my educational material, and actually not the educational material as far as class, but as far as all the other stuff you have to do for school now to make sure you're not a raving lecher or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And it really goes along the lines of concept creep. You wanted to talk a little bit about microaggressions, so we're going to start with that because it'll lead into
Mm-hmm.
what I was talking about. And then I thought if we have a little time, we can finish with maybe some sound biteable stuff because I had an idea about ways we might be able to spread this channel.
Yeah. So I like what you said there about concept creep because, um, oh, I remember where this popped into my head. It was when we were listening to Gad Sad talking about Sapolsky, which, you know, normal guy, wet dream is the dude from Office Space, two chicks at once. But for Sam, wet dream fantasy is Gad Sad and Dr. Sapolsky talking about, you know, deep philosophical stuff.
Yeah,
But
guess I had to put up parasitic mind because that's where
yeah,
he goes into concept creep a lot. So
but what he was specifically what he was talking about, where they got on that train was talking about zebras and
train
ulcers.
giggity
Yeah. Yep.
train to Paris.
Yes. Zebras and ulcers, right? And
Mhm.
and as Sad put it, as he was kind of summarizing, the idea is that because they don't have this constant low level existential stress that humans have, and for some reason the idea of microaggressions popped into my head when he was talking about this. It occurred to me that, oh, so the people who came up with this nonsense of idea of microaggressions, they were actually onto something. But here's the problem from coming at everything from a rigid political ideology rather than a philosophical ideology, and then figuring out how things work, is from the postmodernist Marxist school, everything is power. Okay. So a let's not call it a microaggression, because really what it is a micro or a miniature stressor. It
Mhm.
is something that stresses you out, because this person was rude to me and it ruined my afternoon, whatever. It's a small scale stress. So that is something legitimate. That is something to consider. How does that affect the individual? But if you're coming at everything from the idea of power politics, then it's, I must defeat that person. And this is where the microaggression comes from. That person has not just that wasn't just, someone who was impolite. That is someone who is assaulting me verbally. That is someone who is being aggressive, and now I must counterattack.
Well, a comma in there, a little. You use the word impolite. The problem with the whole microaggression discussion, one of the many problems, is that a lot of things that are considered polite are thrown into the mix. So someone like you and me
Mm-hmm,
think we're
mm-hmm.
being old school Southern polite, thank you, ma'am, and we misgendered somebody, something along those lines, are considered. We This is the problem with the whole discussion. You're talking, yes, power politics,
Mm-hmm.
power power culture, we'll call it, because it's not even politics. Politics
Yeah,
implies the voting, the actual structure in the
that's a good point,
at a
because
political
the
level.
the political structure, the political fixes that come from all this is all downstream of the power dynamics and hierarchies
Mhm.
within our culture and society.
Yeah, so therein lies the major root of the problem. Me and someone of a different skin tone walking down the same street, that whole ideology implies that I have power over them,
Mm-hmm.
and that everything I do in my life is going to be in the vein of trying to keep that power, whether it seems polite or not. So yeah. Now, when you talk about stress, it's realistically projected anxiety. So Anxiety is putting the worst possible future on or possible outcome on an unknown future, whereas this is more in line with putting the worst possible intent on an unknown action.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I may have just bit my lip and you looked at me at that moment and I've got a sour face. That's a microaggression if you
Mm-hmm.
are underneath me in the power dynamic. So this is it's realistically it's very narcissistic. It's very self-involved. You're saying your face is about me because of ideology.
And now unpack this a little bit more. Feeding that narcissism, this is where the term is so problematic of microaggression, of being an aggressor, that, silence is violence, and, assaulting me with your words. Do kids today even, have they ever even heard the phrase sticks and stones? I assume not. But
That's the phrase that comes to mind every time I hear anything even semi-related to this conversation. I'm like, when I was a kid, we had sticks and stones, break my bones, your words will never hurt me. And what was the follow-up to it? I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you
mhm,
say bounces off me and sticks to you. So yeah, we used to have this thing. I just saw on the moms and dads page of our thing, what do you say to a kindergartner whose friend is blah 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 blah? And I'm like, I resisted the urge. I really wanted to, but I resisted the urge to get on there and say, give them the old sticks and stones speech. Grow a resilient child. Quit coddling
exactly.
this
Well,
kid.
exactly. And what you just said is what I was getting to, of why it is so important, because
You know what? I'm gonna
this
post it.
this is how
I'm
you
gonna.
create resiliency. And instead what you are creating is resentment, because if let's take actual aggression, actual assault. For the most part, if someone assaults you, all the overwhelming majority, if not all of the blame, is on them. Okay, because so very infrequently is physical violence actually justified. So by coming up with this idea of a microaggression, well, then you never have to look inward, which fits perfectly with the, ballooning narcissism of our society. Is what what should be happening with those miniature stressors, what we should be working on individually and communally with each other, is why are you letting that get to you? Let it go, ignore it, let it bounce off you. Why are you letting that get to you? Let's unpack that so that you know, you can have these things just wash over you and don't worry about it, and don't let it ruin your whole day.
Well, that's where the ideology comes in because it gets to them because it's part of a bigger system.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you take an individuality approach, you can't use that. And
Yeah.
that's why they completely reject liberalism. So again, if you're a conservative listening, please quit calling these quote unquote progressive libtards or liberals or bleeding heart liberals or whatever term you like to use, because it's no longer liberal. Liberal is the individual. Liberal is a specific thing. It's been hijacked because they liked the positive notion of that word and they're using it to, it's the Trojan horse. The term liberal has become the Trojan horse. I don't even know what to call myself anymore because I don't want to extend that Trojan horse. I don't want to be the horse, right? I don't want to be the person that someone comes across and says, "Oh, you're not as bad as I thought," who was a conservative, and that opened the door for somebody else to come in behind me and hijack that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know what to go by anymore. I would say the same for conservatives. You should stop letting, because the far right takes hijacks conservatives, right? Far right ideology is authoritarian and actually not conservative. Far left ideology is not liberal. We need to figure out a way to kind of consolidate these terms in a way that really makes that clear. Because if you're a neo-Nazi, you want to change society to fit your mold. That's the opposite of conservatism. Conservatism is like things are fine the way they are. Let's keep chugging along.
So
Did I derail us?
no, I'm just trying to get my thoughts back and not go off on a tangent off of what you said. But what So which is healthier? The mental health is all, been a buzzword the last few years. It's, oh, we have a mental health crisis, but let's not actually address mental health. Let's not have honest conversations about what is causing this and how we fix this, because instead, what a lot of the people who use the idea of, oh, we have a mental health crisis, it's simply another tool, another weapon to bludgeon the opposition into silence. You're affecting my mental health. No, you're affecting your mental health with this warped attitude of how you see the world. So which is healthier, this power dynamic idea or the old-fashioned idea of, hey, let's unpack on an individual level why you let all of these small things explode into big things, and then, you know, ruin your whole day, ruin your week, ultimately ruin your life because you keep dwelling on this stuff. And it's having both, having mental things that do lead to the physical things. That's the whole point of the title of the book, is that those stresses, zebras don't have ulcers because they don't have those long-term stresses. Long-term stress leads to physical ailment.
And short term stresses that you can be victorious over actually lead to physical health. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole point of the thing. And that's what got me into that whole topic. And I never ever released it, but I did my little PowerPoint presentation talk on how the whole ideology has a negative impact on the individual. And this was one of the major points, is because it creates chronic stress. And when you create chronic stress, you're going to lead downstream to all of these things that are having a disproportionate, for those that just listening, I air quoted that, disproportionate effect on people of color or minorities or women or social economic status. Well, that one's kind of tough because you're going to be stressed more if you're low social SES anyways. But all of just the ideology in general is an upstream portion of a lot of negative health effects from this. I'm halfway through it. I don't know, stupid YouTube in their way they do notifications. Peterson had a brilliant lady, Ellen Langer, Dr. Ellen Langer, on his show, and I'm about halfway through it. And she's basically wrote a book about a lot of the things I'm trying to put into my thesis. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
how have I never heard of this person? Well, YouTube didn't give me a notification when she popped up. And I guess her opinions are unpopular, so she doesn't even come up in Google Scholar searches very easily. So, you
Yikes.
know, yay for unbiased media. But yeah, I mean, they did studies where and this was the first I heard of all this. Now, I would like to see some of the methods to see where there could be confounders in here, but the gist of some of these studies where they took old people and put them on a resort where they basically mimicked their world from 20 years ago.
Hmm.
So it would be like us going to a resort where everything was styled in the 90s, including the fact that you don't have a phone in your pocket,
Hmm.
all of those things. And after 2 weeks, everybody had health marker benefits that are associated with aging. So, blood pressure, even objective judgment of how old they looked
Hmm.
went down by several years just from being in that environment for 2 weeks. That's kind of crazy. That is exactly what I'm looking into, because your mental health affects your physical health. And the reason I'm so dead set against this ideology is not just that it's destroying the country, but it's destroying people as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And psychology is the individual, sociology is the collective psychology, and the country is going to reflect the health of the individual on a large scale. So I want to do my part on the individual level because it will leak up the system.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, microaggressions are part of that, because what it is just as you pointed out earlier, a constant stressor on people, especially since they have to actually go through the process of, I got this look from this person. We'll stick with the look. I got this look from this person. What could they be thinking? Is it this? Is it that? And every single one of them negative.
Mhm.
Yeah, you asked me when you were down here about not letting one thing ruin your day.
Yep.
Your event was not a good example, because I don't care how stoic you are, you drop your phone in the Galveston Bay and
Yeah.
to never be recovered, you're gonna have a bad day, because there's not only is it just super annoying, but there's a process that follows it,
Yep.
including the time you had no phone and I had to try to dig up an old phone that had a broken screen so you could at least get on Southwest and try to do all
Yeah.
of that.
Thankfully you did. So that made things easier. But then the next day I had to go out and go, all right, now how much is this going to cost me? What am I going to have to do to get a new one? Blah, blah, blah. Take time out of my day. Um,
but no, when
but
when when you first asked that, you didn't tell me what it was about.
yeah.
And my first thought was like, someone cuts you off in traffic and you have a bad day for the rest
Hmm.
of the day, things like that. A little bit of stoicism goes a long way. Or Marcus Aurelius was not wrong. Is it as easy as a lot of people
Yeah.
like to think it is? No. But at the same time, I always have to connect things to the physical because that's my thing. But there's to me, what I teach people that I train is, this is your ready stance. This is your stress stance. So it's feeling the whole floor. It's having a little tension in the posterior chain. It's a slight tension of the glutes. It's a little bit of tension in the abs, but just enough. But you're breathing through the belly and you're relaxed. So it's finding a flow state between tense and relaxed that will handle stress when it comes. It's the ready stance. It's the shortstop stance. It's and you can do that in any position. You could do it on one leg. You can do it sitting down, you know. And I teach people this physically. There's got to be a mental equivalent of
Hmm.
that, and I think it's something akin to stoicism.
Well, and why it's important is I'm glad you went into the physical example because it just made me think of an example we've used before, which is walking down the stairs and your dog's trying to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you need the you need that physical work so that when that unexpected big thing hits you, you don't go tumbling down the stairs and break something. It's whoop, I caught myself even though Hamilton went barreling between my legs. Okay, same thing with I think there has to be an analogy, a parallel between the mental. If you're constantly having meltdowns over little things, how are you going to deal with the big thing? Okay, because you're already in a mental and probably thus physical state that you are weakened. It's much the same way that you know you, you don't get sick because it's cold. Your body is just struggling more because it's harder to maintain its processes when it's cold. So you're in a weakened state. Malnutrition per se doesn't cause these diseases, but you're in a weakened state so that you're more susceptible when something bigger comes along. And then it completely destroys your whole system. Well, there's got to be a parallel there in the mental that if you're not
I
in a
have it.
in a
I, I
healthy
I had to
state,
write this down because I think
okay.
this is a part of a bigger thought. Uh, in that flow state, one of the things is your skeleton controls basically your structure. Without your skeleton, you'd be jelly, just kind of flowing on the ground, right? And we probably wouldn't have lived very long in that state in gravity, because things bigger than an amoeba are more subject to gravity at that point. Uh, your your skeleton is the actual structure, but when it comes to the dynamics in all the joints that make up the structure, to be in your best state, the muscles are actually in a slight tonic control. So tonicity is the degree that a muscle is activated at any given time. You want perfect muscle tone. Let me hit you in the back of the head with a sledgehammer, and in about an hour, you'll be in rigor mortis. That's perfect muscle tone. Okay, so the degree to that they're activated at any given time. So when it comes to the joints and complete body control for preserving the body, you want the skeleton to be there as a support structure, but you want the muscles to be in control of every joint to just enough of a degree that they're doing their job. So when I say something like soft knees, what that is a slight bend of the knee so you're not stacking the bones, and the muscles are doing just enough to keep you in a state where, like, if you were on a boat and a wave hit, you would kind of just you have your sea
Mm-hmm.
legs. Sea legs is a great example. If you want to develop this, one way to do it is to get on water, because and get on water and try not to have level changes of your body. So that's a good way to do it. They make little tools that do that, but I mean, get out in nature. Water's better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we're talking about a flow state that implies fluidity, which means the muscles are in control of the joints. Well, so now let's go into the greater thought. Now, when we talk about the mental state, we have structural things we have very little consciousness of, but our prefrontal cortex can keep everything in a balance. And if we look at it that way, we might be able to combat this rigid, hardcore stress response that we get. So if we can stay in some sort of mental flow of being able to basically have mental sea legs and adjust to the waves, then we might be in the perfect state. How we get there, that's where the longer conversation comes in, and we've got a lot of research to do. Uh, but I think just the thought of it is a good start. And you don't get that with a rigid ideology that tells
Mm-hmm.
you everybody's against you.
Speaking of which, let's transition to, because I think this is a good specific example of what we're talking about, which is the gender nonsense
Mm-hmm.
that that you ran into, which
Well, let me
and
just
you
introduce it and then we'll put
okay.
them together. Okay, so this is what I came across, and this is from a sociological and a legal standpoint. Very, very worrisome for me, because
Mm-hmm.
you say, oh, it's just in a little employee training or student training thing. That's how they all start until they become normalized, because all the students going through this training are going to be in the workforce in about 4 years, right? So then they're going to see it in an employee training, and then it's going to make its way in law. That's exactly how Gadsad and Jordan Peterson really became famous, was because they stood up against this many years ago. Was it 2014?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
It was
2000.
really early on.
Yeah, early on, Bill C-16 in Canada, and this was what made them famous. They said forcing the pronouns is going to lead to something bigger. And guess what? You think you have freedom of speech in Canada? You don't have freedom of speech in Canada. In
Exactly.
fact, you have compelled speech, which is exactly what they warned against. So this is part of a module I had to go through for sexual misconduct in college. Which, by the way, I don't think anybody that wrote this has ever been in a relationship, but that is beside the point. We might get into a little bit of that, because if you see, one of my tabs is Wheel Time season 3
You.
there, which,
Oh dear.
oh dear, yeah. But I have highlighted here negative. So this is under sexual harassment. All right. Negatively stereotyping members of the LGBTQ community. That is considered sexual harassment. That's pretty vague.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, what is negatively stereotyping someone of the LGBTQ community? We don't get a definition, right? Now, where this is also worrisome, so let's even say there's a hard definition there. Now let's get to the bottom of the slippery slope. This is the legality of sexual harassment in the state of Texas. So there are several ways to commit this offense, but as it pertains to sexual harassment, any communication that contains an indecent proposal can violate the Texas statute. So we're still in the legal part. So now in the legal side, it still requires an indecent proposal. But when you combine the two, now negatively stereotyping enters the law, then we're going to be under the same penalty because it's the same crime. Now, this is the misdemeanor type, but let's look at Criminal harassment. As a Class B misdemeanor, this offense can draw up to 6 months in jail and a fine of up to $2,000 for the first offense, and a year in jail and up to $4,000 for the second offense. So we just made a definition in one context of something that could be sexual harassment. There is a legal penalty for sexual harassment in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
How this is where I like to draw lines. This is where when we talk the slippery slope argument, I want to say, okay, do we allow this? But I want you to clearly define where the slope ends, because there's the bottom of the slope.
Yeah, where are the guardrails?
Yeah, now add protected classes to that. Remember, you can add penalties for hate crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not even the bottom, what I just showed you. Now add a hate crime to that, and you're going way down the slope. So yes, okay, oh, it's harmless, it's just a little college module. No, because these things keep creeping and creeping and creeping and creeping forward until they end up in law.
Well, and the concerning point that I brought up when we were talking about this when last week or whenever it was, that this is a government organ. This is a state institution. This is a public university. Therefore, this is an entity acting under the auspices of the state, and they are creating a bureaucratic and regulatory instrument that has the ability to produce criminal penalty. That's disconcerting. I don't care who you are or where you stand, that should be concerning to you, unless you are completely bought and sold into Marxist power politics, and then you don't give a damn about due process. You care about outcomes, and that's what you see here, because this is and I have a hard time giving the benefit of the doubt anymore that I think the vague language is on purpose, because this isn't about protecting and then punishing the guilty. This is about wielding a tool for power. So it's open-ended, because we want to be able to determine, we want to be able to shift who's a protected class and who's a violator.
Add to that. This is straight from their website, so I'm not making anything up here. They've got an ESG score.
Of course they do.
Which I think is actually illegal in the state of Texas. So we might want to keep this feather in our hat here. But yeah, what's the first one? Oh, this is environmental sustainability right here. Creates diverse, equitable, and inclusive societies that enable access, support wellness, improve quality of life, and increase citizen engagement. All sounds great, but we've seen all that shit before.
How are you creating a better quality of life when you are putting a chunk of your populace in a constant state of fear when it comes to interacting? I was about to say interacting with the opposite sex. That's what it used to be. Now it's interacting with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you don't know where they sit on this rainbow spectrum and who you're going to offend with what.
Yeah,
and what the possible penalties of that will be.
Well, and also, let me add a layer to this, and this is one of the things that got me really worried about it, because I'm in the psychology department, right? Right now, the body dysphoria is the technical definition for what is considered trans ideology, right? Or trans identity, I should say, because this person was born in a certain body and they are unhappy with it, and they are basically being mentally tormented by being in this body, theoretically. I say theoretically not because it doesn't happen, so let me clarify that. It does happen, but there are so many people being swept up in the wave right now that it's not necessarily happening to them, but they think it should be happening to them. So we'll stick with the actual cases of it. It is body dysphoria. It's the same as a bodybuilder who is never big enough. It is the same as an anorexic who is never skinny enough. It's or a bulimic as well. So it's what happens if DSM-6 comes out and they no longer put that in there because
Hmm.
it's stigmatizing. But we have had many episodes of this talking about body dysphoria and transgenderism, and they retroactively say I committed sexual harassment on everybody who's listened to this transgender person put up a complaint from
We
a video that's still on YouTube.
a while back we brought up the statistics, the suicide statistics, and they're jarring. They should be scary. They should lead to people, questioning this whole ideological nonsense. But no, instead, it's stigmatizing to bring up the suicide statistics. We're trying to have an open conversation here that will help people, but no, you're not allowed to do that. Now you have to be punished for negatively stigmatizing a protected class.
Which is the circular reason or the mental gymnastics, because talking about the suicide statistics is stigmatizing, yet they're more this this phenomena is more common because the stigma is being raised, as in removed, raised off the thing. So is it the stigma is going down, or is the stigma causing the suicides? Which one is it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't have one without the other. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Come on. uh yeah, so this is where the creep comes in, and this is what we always talk about. This is the danger of slippery slopes, and they happen incrementally and then they happen all at once. And the problem is there's a what we see, we go back to Canada. There's a consequence for this. Jordan Peterson just went through his legal challenge where he
Mm-hmm.
lost because he was not doing what he was supposed to do by the boards of the Psychological Association of Canada. Well, we got a definition in one area, we've got a criminal penalty in another area, and I'm going to try to get a license in this field. If we don't stand up to this now, everybody is going to suffer later. And I'm thinking about my path, but my path isn't unique.
So something else that and this was this was something I heard about several years ago, and listening to Williamson and Sad talk about it, they brought it up, and it's apparently accelerating. And this is how these things work. That CRT and gender ideology started as fringe ideologies on college campuses, fringe ideologies within academia. Well, now there's another one that's becoming very quickly not so fringe, which is rejecting someone is no longer just part of life. You're violating their civil rights because you have a civil right to have sex. If I don't want to have sex with someone who is transgender, I have just violated their civil rights. Oh, that's no, that's a straw man. It's happening. It's being talked about in the same way that maps are being talked about. And
Yeah,
it's accelerating.
and the problem is and I don't know if this is something that's going to be by design, but keeping it on the cultural level allows that side to keep saying straw man, because then any example you bring up is going to be an antidote, right?
Mhm.
Whereas if it becomes codified into law, then you have a real argument, right? Or it's even presented to be codified into law, then you have a real argument. But now we get into vagaries like sexual harassment. You know, you say you get to that point and you're like, oh my God, you have a penis. No, well, you've just stereotyped and stigmatized a transgender individual. So no, you're not accused of uh, discrimination, but you're accused of harassment or misconduct.
Mhm.
and you could have a penalty, even if it's just being kicked out of school or uh, a small civil case or something. Oh, you contributed to this person's mental discomfort because you pointed out that they had a penis, even though they're a girl,
Mhm.
right?
Well, the late great Walter Williams used to love to use this as an example of the absurdity of the warping of the definition of discrimination, because as he liked to point out, well, you should be discriminating. It used to be a good thing to have discriminating taste. Now you can discriminate wrongly, you can discriminate uh, uh, improperly, but the
But the
example he
but the implication is if you discriminate wrongly, you're going to suffer anyways. You don't need to suffer legally. Like if I
that's
don't
a good
hire
point.
if I don't
Yeah,
hire somebody because they're the wrong skin color, but they're the best candidate, I'm going to suffer anyways.
and that is the uh the thought train he would eventually go down, which is to point out that the reason Jim Crow existed is because racist business owners got tired of losing money to people who may have been just as racist as they were, but they were willing to serve the black community because of money. And they didn't like that. So now I want to enshrine my own discrimination into law and force everybody to do it this way because other people won't go along with my ideology. It's the same idea. But back to the beginning of the train, which is the absurdity, and I heard him saying this in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it sounded ridiculous then, and now it sounds prophetic, which is uh I discriminated against many women who weren't Mrs. Williams. You know, he had a type. He was not interested in dating women who weren't black. He just wasn't. He was not attracted to women who weren't black. So he was discriminating. So he says, "So am I racist? Because I never dated anyone who wasn't my own skin color. That was just my preference. That used to be that's you have a type. That's your preference. But now, well, by the ideology, the growing ideology of what was then the early days of CRT spilling out into mass culture instead of just campus culture. Oh well, now I'm a racist. He would say because I discriminated against people who weren't this type of woman. Well, that sounds absurd. And now it sounds prophetic because, oh, well, yeah, you are, is what some people would say now.
No, he can't be because you can't be racist in that
Well, he
direction.
could because he's an Uncle Tom,
Yeah.
just like Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy.
Yes. And Torios is the Hispanic face of white nationalism. But he got 20 years in jail. He wasn't even at the Capitol in Jan 6, but he made some tweets.
Mm-hmm.
He got 20 years in jail for tweets. Again, this just it's completely unrelated, but it adds weight to what we're talking about because look at the creep.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the creep. Freedom of speech. You think you have freedom of speech? Saying go express yourself and you get 20 years in jail. There you go. But yeah, you actually might have pushed me in the direction of what I wanted to talk about with the Sapolsky interview with Chris Williamson because it's about meritocracy. And finish any thoughts you have about what we're talking about because I
No,
pretty much
that was it.
said my piece. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Let's move on.
Okay, so hopefully we might get a good soundbite out of this, but I'm just kind of playing with something because a lot of times I'm listening to a video, another podcast, and I want to make a comment, but my comment would be like a mini little book,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be better said in like 30 seconds. And if we can clip those, we can actually drop those in the comments of these things. And that would, I mean, anybody who clicks on that would be immediately in the running to be part of the audience. Whether it's a good strategy or not, I don't know. I don't know if it's even frowned upon in this space. I don't think so, but I don't know per se. I don't know what the etiquette is here, but I was listening to Sapolsky and Williamson, which is an interview I was looking forward to because you know I love
Mhm.
modern wisdom for the way he interviews, and you know I'm a big Sapolsky fan from his literature. Uh, and they were talking about free will. And of course, you have to talk about free will with Sapolsky because he just wrote a book called Determined, which says basically how you don't have any free will, which is on the way. I had it on back order. It is on the way. I got the ship notice this morning. But in that interview, I actually disagreed with Sapolsky while agreeing with him on so many things. And it is my agreement with him that caused me to disagree with him. And this is where I think consistency of thought kind of comes through. And some people want to be a certain way, even though their actual work goes in the opposite way. Wrangham is another example where he talks about how lesser alpha males have domesticated the alpha male over time, over the last 10,000 years, because two beats up one every time. And the one has to be able to negotiate with the group. And so some benevolence in a leader is actually desirable. But his final conclusion is we need to feminize males. And it's like, no, you just spent an hour talking about how two males are what domesticated the alpha male, not females domesticated the alpha male, right? So if you feminize all males, then who's going to stand up to the alpha male? Nobody. Well, so what he was talking about was after his little tirade of all the things that are associated with free will but aren't actually there, how that should lead to us being in such an understanding state that, blah 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 blah, communism, right? Socialism. We should all be there, because why should you celebrate merit if you didn't have the will to get there to begin with? That's where I disagree, because we have nature and nurture and they're both involved. The celebration of merit in a society is part of the environment. And it is the part of the environment that triggers the nature of the people who are going to be the high achievers. And without the high achievers, we never evolve. So because I don't believe in free will, I actually think meritocracy is 100% necessary, because it's the trigger to keep evolving the species. And without it, you would not have that positive feedback loop that gets people to do the thing that needs to be done.
Mm. Yeah, if you, I mean, it's just basic carrot and stick stuff, for which, for, isn't he an evolutionary biologist? I feel like this should be obvious. It's now you say bad dog to the when he craps on the carpet, and you say, good dog when he chases off the robber, because that's what he's supposed to do. And you need to reinforce that. And we need to reinforce those positives and push against the negatives on both individual and a cultural level, or things get, I was going to say things get real bad, but things get where we are now.
Yeah, and so let me add to the other side of this. I know where he's coming from, because yes, if you had all of these things going for you from the beginning, whether it be your genetics, your genetically high IQ, you have two parents in the home environment, you have a good educational system environment, you have the biological markers to benefit from that. Yeah, you can take a step back and say, okay, I lucked out a little bit on this. But now, as a society, what we can do going forward, instead of just saying, well, let's equalize everybody because it's all a matter of chance, we can create an environment that not only incentivizes merit, but incentivizes the winners of the lottery to be benevolent to the people who didn't win. And if we create that incentive structure, we create an environment that triggers the need to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
And if being the best is also how well you take care of people, I mean, the what's the saying? The when a man plants a tree, he will never sit under. That's when a society is growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're benevolent, because when you incentivize that sort of behavior, then you've created an environment that everybody's going to benefit from. Because if you're the person born with it and grew up with it, you're going to be the best possible person you can be because you're going to strive for that. But also, if incentivizing the taking care of those that didn't have, the double aces on the draw, they're going to be taken care of as well. And they're going to be the best version of themselves. And so we can keep that ball rolling. Obviously, there's always going to be evil in the world. There's going to be bad actors and everything. But if we create an incentive structure, a game, if the game incentivizes good behavior, then people will behave well.
And the inverse is also abundantly true.
Yeah, which we're seeing nowadays, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
The game incentivizes the crooked people. That's the problem. And when somebody like Sapolsky or any number of these people that have a good heart and have a lot of knowledge but can't seem to put the two together, uh, the problem is the game. The problem is not uh, capitalism versus communism versus, it's the fact that we leave these bad actors unchecked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for so as a bipartisan example, you know, you have two people in Congress, one on either side, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, that everybody hates and everybody complains about, and they've both been there for like 40 plus years each, and they are both 1,000 times wealthier than they were when they first went into Congress, and yet they're still there, and they keep getting sent there. Well, why? Because they rigged the system so that to close the door behind them.
Yeah, they've done a good job of, first of all, raising a lot of money, uh, which is why they're rich, because they're getting a little cut of that. Second of all, creating a system where the people who vote for them aren't voting for them, they're voting against the other side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what they created. Nobody in San Francisco loves Nancy Pelosi, but they're all lefties. So they're voting against the righty that runs against her.
Mm-hmm.
And the DNC makes sure nobody can primary her.
And then the RNC does the thing. I mean, for crying out loud, Mitch McConnell is from Kentucky, which is a pretty deep red state. So you would think that a real conservative would get elected there. No, it's the exact same thing. It's, well, we can't let the Democrat win. Okay.
Well, here's the thing about the Republican Party right now. Everybody talks about how they're the movers and shakers right now, right? There's so much turmoil within, and the Democratic Party is so united. That's because to be a Republican now and have traditional Republican values is actually not conservative, because things have shifted so far
Mm-hmm.
left. You actually need radical change to go back to a more right-leaning, more traditionalist idea, right? I actually like the word traditionalist better than conservative, but
Mm-hmm.
to shift back in that direction, you actually need movement. And conservatism is about no movement.
It's interesting that you say that, because someone very different from you has been saying something like this for the past couple of months, listening to the Steve Deace show. He's been making this point, not in this way, but I think you just elevated the point, which is there is a difference between tradition and nostalgia.
Mhm.
And this is where the conservative movement and the Republican Party, as the political avatar of that movement, went so very wrong, which is they mistook and misplaced tradition for nostalgia. I don't remember who first said it, but there's a reason that only in America is the conservative political party the more classically liberal party, because what they're trying to conserve was very radical and very liberal.
Mm-hmm.
It
Well,
was the culmination of these liberal ideas. That's what you're trying to conserve, and that's the tradition. Nostalgia just looks at, and maybe you have a better way of explaining this, but nostalgia is just looking at the veneer of
mm-hmm.
things. It's just looking at
How does that make
it's
me feel?
how does
How,
that exactly?
oh, I listened to, some spin doctors from the 90s and I feel good about it. That's nostalgia. Music should be like this. Music shouldn't be with this mumble rap that's now. That's nostalgia. Yeah, you're complaining about the now, you're looking back at the past, but it's a feeling. Whereas actually tradition is about this is what was working for that. So now if I could say, well, the principles of music, and I don't know enough about music to go
Yeah.
too into detail here, but the principles of music, the beat was this, the rhythm was here, the melody was here, the harmony was here, and they completely did away with it with this mumble rap. But all you have is left is the beat, which is very simple minded, but people just kind of fall into it. And so I know enough about music to say that much. It's actually a left brain, right brain thing, but
Mm-hmm.
the it that would be actual traditionalism. It's like, oh, we need to get back to actually having depth to this, to having, meaning to the music. Whereas when we talk politics, it's, well, these were the things that were working in this time, and this is why progress happened. And then we stopped doing that and we got this a direction, and now we're regressing. So now let's go back to those traditional values. If you're a constitutionalist, you're a liberal. That's the thing, because that is the most liberal document ever written.
Mm-hmm.
And realistically, I wanted to get on this high horse last time and I forgot about it. I hate this talk about the candidates now where they're like, Second Amendment stance. No, because every stance for a presidential candidate should start with Constitution and.
Mm-hmm.
And here's all my ideas on top of that. Constitution is stance number one for a presidential candidate. You want to make a constitutional amendment? Well, that's what Congress is for.
Mm-hmm. Yep. At least it should be.
Yeah, Constitution and. So if it's in the Second Amendment, guess what? You as a presidential candidate have nothing to say about that.
It's why the only gun control advocates I actually respect are the ones that are openly and vocally advocating for the repeal of the Second Amendment, because at least they're being honest. All right, what else did you have?
Well, let's completely pivot since we're on short time anyways. Since I've got class tonight. Let's since we're not that one. Since we're already in a cranky get off my lawn mood. Here we go. Wheel of Time season
Oh no.
3 is based on the fourth book. So we completely skipped over the best book in the entire series, which was book 3. At least in this analysis, they say it's very Rand and Perrin centric, which would be true to book 4. And apparently Rand is going to go to the Isle Waste, and it says we're going to revisit the two rivers, so I'm assuming that's the Perrin part.
Mm. I'm not surprised, and I can't remember if I said this when we were ranting about the episode. I was certainly thinking it, and I think I may have ranted it to my wife when I watched it, is that the way season 2 ended, how could you possibly do the Dragon Reborn? Because the whole point of the Dragon Reborn is that he has proclaimed himself, but he's not accepted. There are no crowds cheering him, right? I mean, the book opens with them hiding out in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that with the way you ended season 2. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that, yeah, we're basically skipping book 3 and we're just going straight to book 4.
Yeah, and we're just going to have the three girls, Avienda, Bane, and Chade, saying, "Oh, you're the corn," and he's going to say, "I'm what?" And
Mm-hmm.
you need to come with us to the waste, and they're going to go because that's how children write stories. But Also, there's the fact that they're on the other side of the continent right now, which in the end of book 3, they were kind of right there by the waist and still took a portal stone. So
Mhm.
uh, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, interesting little read. Rafe gave away nuggets about what's going to happen. Like the sea folk are going to
Mhm.
apparently be a big part of the next one, which, you know, because add diversity to the show. Oh, wait, never mind.
Yeah.
It's going
Okay.
to be no change.
It
Uh,
that's where diversity can have an impact. And this is, I mentioned before, Drinker keeps harping on this point, which is that one of the reasons you have a coherent, cogent, logical geography to your fantasy setting is so that the reader, the viewer, can follow along in an alien world, right? If you know, the movie Zulu, you just look at a poster and you know where that takes place in this world. You know what that is. If you see a trailer for a Holmesian, a Sherlock Holmes story, and oh, that's Victorian England. You know from looking at it. You don't know who or what anything is in these, metropolitan LA, casted stories. It's I okay. And then when you do see something new and unique, it's not interesting. When you first get to the sea folk, and that's one of the things that makes the Dragon Reborn really interesting, is the girls on the ship, on the sea folk ship, because it is so different. How's it different? I mean, what are they going to do? Cast all white people? Let's make them all Dutch.
no,
It is
but
different.
with the way they did things and the descriptions in the books, they better be like all Iman and darker. You know, it's
Mhm.
that's the only way they could do it. But even still, you've got one of Alana's warders, Ivan. He's like he's like, you know, even as people of color go, he's like super dark, right? So how is he going to be separated in the descriptors? So what they're going to have to do is I guess they're going to do the jewelry and the tattoos, but we already have people with tattoos.
Mhm.
You know what?
And for crying out loud, you gave
They better be
face
topless. I'm sorry.
you gave
They
face
have
scars to the
avoided,
Shanschen.
yeah,
What
they
what are
have
nose
avoided
rings
this.
gonna do? Yeah. Oh wow, you have a nose ring connected to an earring, and you have medallions on them. Oh, you put face scars on the Sanshin. It's gonna be ho hum. It's not going to be interesting. It can't be because of how you have established this world.
Yeah, and the way they describe Tanchico in, first of all, that article, I'm not the best editor ever, but the amount of spelling mistakes they made in there, and it was just over and over and over again, is like,
Yeah.
did you write this while drunk at midnight trying to get it out to your to
I I
your
I have seen so much of that lately. It makes me wonder how many because
yeah, spell check would
bl
have done this.
yeah, blogs and news articles online have been part of the grind for a while. It's all about clicks. And so it's all about speed, which makes me wonder how many of them are just doing voice to text, which is,
Hmm.
and then
That
not
would make
copy
sense of a
editing.
lot of the spelling errors.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it would be like Tan Chico, Tun Chico, T Chico, you know. But the way they described it, it's going to be Pirate Town. I mean, I'm just like, this is like,
All right, whatever.
yeah, they're like, there's gonna be a bar, and then it's crazy, and anybody could kill you at any minute. I'm like,
Yeah, I've,
oh,
I've already seen that. It was called Blood Sales, and the first season was pretty good and more interesting than anything you people have done.
I was thinking of like Pirates of the Caribbean, because you know they're gonna try to be funny with it,
Mm.
and just and how do we get to Tanchico? Because we know the story going back to the tower, then going down to Tyr, everything happening there, and then going to Tanchico because they captured the Black Sisters. Why are we in Tanchico now? We have no reason to be in Tanchico. Are you going to give us a reason in episode 1 or 2 that is coherent while still telling the rest of the story? I
That
don't know.
that's a good point. The only thing they set up in season two, with all of that, all the time they spent in season two, the only thing they set up was the Dragon Reborn.
Mhm.
They didn't set up any of the other storylines. It well, except kind of sort of the Aiel part of it, because oh look, we have Aiel and we heard the word Karakarn, whatever the hell that means.
Mhm.
But for the girls, their storylines that happen in books 3 and 4, that was set up in book 2. You could see where it was going, with Matt and the dagger, and what had happened in the tower, and what had happened to the girls, and what had happened with the Black Ajah. All of these things were done in order to progress that storyline. There's no storylines here.
Yeah, the only thing I can't even think. So they're talking about Perrin and Rand. So Rand is apparently going to go to the Waste, theoretically. Perrin is going to go to the Two Rivers. The Sea Folk, I'm assuming we're going to get in the girl storyline. But why are the girls going to
Mm-hmm.
Tanchico? Is Egwene going to go with them, or is she going to go with Rand? Uh, Matt, what's going to happen with Matt? Does he go to Tanchico with the girls if he's not with Perrin or Rand? Or is he going to go with Rand? And then we're going to get some of the things that we get from Rydian with with Matt, except now he's already like, oh, I'm a hero of the Horn. Ugh. You know, I mean, where do you go with him from here? Because you've already just established, oh, he's a hero of the Horn, and now all of a sudden he can fight like nobody else, and he's got all these memories, and oh, Uno's there too, and Uno's got Kane, by the way. Did you see that article?
Uh, uh,
Because he's short and furious, and is a hunter or hero of the Horn.
Yikes.
The only
All right.
lore connection you can get there is that Birgitte always talks about Uno as being a well set up man. But other than that, you're stretching right here. But
Well,
apparently Judkin said it, and he's like, "Yeah, we intended that." Haha.
oh gosh, it's so awful.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of setting up, you just said something that I meant to talk about, but we were ranting so much on the finale that I didn't bring it up. But you actually don't see that Matt can fight, because the only time you actually really see him fighting, he's got the magic juju from the horn. We don't really see him, except he takes out one guy, but it's partly because he stabs him with the Shadow Logoth dagger, and then the guy's done.
Doesn't he take out like three guys in that fight though? Where
Uh,
all the
when
Shan are rushing at him, and
when he busts out of the room, he kills the one guard, and Padden
no,
Fane
no,
calls
on
for
the
people.
the wall.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's got the magic juju. Everything's in slow mo, and the people are moving in blurs.
Mm.
He's part of that because he's a hero of the horn. So we don't actually see him be the badass that he is in the books, because it's, oh look, you and your magical friends are fighting these normal people, and you're obliterating them. So he didn't really get his moment.
Except hurling a spear at Rand. He did that with precision.
Yep.
Because it would have hit Balsamon in the heart if it wasn't an illusion. But that's
Can't wait.
okay because Captain America showed up to save the. Oh, I mean, Perrin with a shield that Uno gave him showed up to save the day.
This is I had a thought just a second ago when we were talking about this, and this is another great example of tradition versus nostalgia. Okay. Tradition. Jordan created a tradition because he laid out all the groundwork. He laid out, the intermediary steps. He took you along on this journey. What they're doing in the show is just trying to steal from those feelings that he evoked, without either understanding or caring or knowing how to mimic that groundwork, the actual work that was done, so that you could have this great feeling.
Well, this is a trend in all of Hollywood right now
Mm-hmm.
because look at The Mandalorian, right? There is some lore there, but what did Disney Studios actually do? Oh, everybody loves Boba Fett and everybody loves Yoda. Let's have a Boba Fett like character and a baby Yoda.
Mhm.
That's all they really did.
Yeah. Well, and you see this with the MCU movies and the box office returns. What has been happening since the end of the Infinity Saga is, except for a few outliers like Spider-Man, is that it's just nostalgia now. So they will tease you with a trailer and they will give you those warm bubbly feelings, and then you have this gigantic drop off from the opening weekend box office to the second weekend box office because there's no there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's bring this one to a close so I can get prepped for class and take a bathroom break. Any final thoughts?
No, that's a good one to end it on because now I'm more looking forward to Friday, which we've said Crossroads for both of us is kind of but now I actually want to get into it, ending it on such a idiotic note. Like, okay, let's get back to the actual good stuff. Even if it is a slog, that's a slog relative to the other books.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, let me look at to see if we got any comments on the last one. The good finale. Yeah, we got, oh shoot, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 comments. Yeah, so we'll have a good one. Let's start with comments last time since it was all on
Yeah,
a finale and there's really not a whole lot of spoiler in it. And then yeah, I'll try to get at least the prologue read by then, but I still got,
it's a pretty hefty prologue. So
yeah.
I think it's like
And
100-page prologue, and I think the hardcover is like 100 pages.
yeah, and stats class is killing me. Uh no, this I'm actually on the border of something here, and hopefully my teacher never listens to these videos because I'm about to talk a little trash. Uh I have never gotten more vague questions expecting specific answers. And I part of the class requirement, which is actually against the ethics stuff we had to go through, the 14 hours of ethics modules we had to go through for human subjects, uh, that actually stayed in there. You shouldn't use your students for your research because their grade, they could have the
Yeah.
idea that their grade may depend on it, but yet we're being used for her research. So I did a bunch of her surveys online, and these were the worst put together surveys I've ever taken part of in my entire life. So the fact that the lectures aren't clear, the tests aren't clear, and her work is pretty bad, I'm actually wondering if she can teach me what I need to know. That's
Oh no.
that's actually problematic. Now there's another stats teacher which I heard is really good, so I'm going to try to get him for the second half of this class. And he's actually my academic advisor. So, which I just found out yesterday, finally after how many weeks of being back in school. But
Yeah.
uh but yeah, so maybe I'll try to make the change there. But yeah, it's really worrying me because I did manage to bring up myself back up to an A now, but it's right there on the bubble. Uh, Not that I've ever been asked my GPA in a job interview, but you do need at least a B in grad school to get the
Mhm.
credit. So, hovering in the B's could easily be a C after the final
Right.
exam.
Right.
So I'm trying to I'm really having to work hard for that class. So I'll try to get as much read in Wheel of Time as I can. Uh, but yeah, anything other than that, if you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. Dude, we need topics sometimes. So
Mhm.
leave those in the comments. Scott, be there for us.
I mean,
It's not
there's
just
always
real.
plenty of crap happening to talk about, but it's not stuff we necessarily want to talk about. And especially if any of our three viewers and listeners have something you're actually interested in, we would rather talk about that.
Well, yeah, and after I clip this and put it in the comments of that Sapolsky interview, if you're a first-time listener from that, tell us what you think.
Hmm.
If you made it this far, just tell us what you think and give us feedback because Yeah, we're not going to stop because of it, but we can always adjust.
Yeah.
That's part of growing, is having our own ideas, but also adapting it to what people want. That's entrepreneurship in a nutshell.
Yep.
So, all right.
See y'all then.
No official advice, no disclaimers needed, I don't think, other than don't break the law, and do everything we can to keep the law from changing to where everything we've already said isn't breaking the law, which was the point of this video. So talk to y'all later.